I can set up the chain right now. I think I should have everybody's email. Wait, Sabrina, actually, can you put your email and your partner's email in the chat?
It's just the one email.
Oh, just that one? Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, the chain should be sent.
I just got it.
All right. I got the chain. Okay, is everyone good to start?
I think we're still waiting for a judge.
Oh,
Okay, we can start.
okay, yeah.
Just to confirm though, college prep first neg. Cool.
Also, Seven Lakes, we're not breaking new. Y'all are just reading the same case as well, right?
Oh no.
Okay, it looks like everyone's here. Can you
We'll
send
send
me
our
that?
case.
Okay, it's sent. Just let me know when you get it.
Oh, wait, did we add?
Um, I didn't make the change. Okay. Did y'all get it? Cool. Double checking. Is anyone not ready? Great. William and I negate. Contention 1 is pacifism. Article 9 has pacified East Asia. Now, Tennyson 17 of Upsala University explains Article 9 is deeply embedded in East Asian peace and has hugely contributed to East Asia's pacification by reducing the sense of insecurity among Japan's neighbors and creating a model of national peaceful development. This has resulted in East Asia more peaceful than any other region in the world. Al-Gapa 14 of the Carnegie Endowment quantifies, in contrast to dire warnings, Asia has witnessed a substantial reduction of wars with growing interstate peace that has endured since 1979. However, revision upends the post-World War II defensive model, sparking regional arms races. Sterling 20 of Shandong University concludes, if Article 9 is revised, it will destroy the most important model of a demilitarized state that the world has ever seen. This will cause regional tension and an arms race in Asia, which would lead to greater conflict. Additionally, given historical animosities, even the perception of remilitarization is sufficient to cause escalation. But Conoco A of the Bulletin confirms subtle changes in its attitude could carry serious security consequences. If discussing nuclear weapons becomes more acceptable in Japan, China and the Koreans might perceive this as a dangerous development and use it as an excuse to increase their military capabilities. Devastatingly, Kimball 14 of UPenn concludes a nuclear arms race in Asia would increase the chance of accidental nuclear war because faulty warning systems might cause one side to misinterpret the other's moves, triggering a mistaken preemption. Contention 2 is proliferation. Article 9 restricts Japanese nuclear proliferation. Sterling 20 explains Article 9 means Japan would have no forms of warfare, interpreted to mean that nuclear weapons would not be maintained. However, revision makes proliferation a viable option. Sterling continues, if Article 9 is revised, Japan will be forced to change its policy on its arms control. There will be no restrictions on possessing, producing, or permitting the introduction of nuclear weapons in the country. GT22 confirms it is a real risk. Japanese right-wing politicians are fanatical about nuclear weapons, and Japan has top computer systems and plutonium, which could produce about 6,000 nuclear bombs. Japan has the capability to acquire nuclear weapons virtually overnight. Empirics prove. Beer 98 confirms, in the absence of Article 9, Japan would likely become one of the few nuclear powers. And it's uniquely likely now. Economist 22 warns Vladimir Putin's war has turbocharged Japanese internal discussions on nuclear deterrence. Even more, beyond granting Japan the constitutional certainty to proliferate, affirming would most likely mandate developing nuclear weapons. Mandelbaum 19 confirms the quickest, cheapest, and technologically most feasible way for Japan would be to acquire nuclear weapons. Devastatingly, a nuclear Japan would make miscalculation inevitable. Lu 17 writes, for MAD to work, the Soviet Union and US required sufficient early warning of 30 minutes. East Asia forces will be so small as to preclude retaliatory capability in the region is too compact, such that warning times will be non-existent. This will generate significant pressures on Pyongyang, Seoul, and Turkey to preempt the slightest of a crisis that might result in nuclear devastation. APA 13 terminalizes war involving just 0.5% of the world's nuclear arsenal will put 2 billion lives at grave risk. The ecological consequences will put the survival of the entire planet at risk, blocking out sunlight. Contention 3 is ending alliances. Currently, Brandt's 20 foreign policy writes, to establish regional hegemony, Beijing must make itself the dominant player in the Western Pacific and rupture American alliances in the region. If China can't do this, it will never have a secure regional base from which to project power globally. Thankfully, after 4 years of Trump, America's Asian allies are strengthening. Olsen 22 of the Washington Post explains Biden's effort to build alliances against China are bearing fruit. Australia and Japan recently signed a defense agreement, and the Philippines authorized extensive ties with the U.S. military. However, affirming DEX cooperation, Calder-Waite warns, in the context of Japanese revision of Article 9, the U.S. will be seen as supporting Japan's reemergence as a great power with an increasingly nationalistic agenda. This may drive countries in the region to China. Even more, remilitarization kills American credibility, driving allies to China. Wadsworth 19 concludes, if Japan were to pursue an offensive strategy, Southeast Asian countries could see this as a sign of Tokyo's loss of faith in the U.S., growing Chinese dominance in the region. Subsequently, the entire global alliance system would crumble. Osland 17 of the Atlantic concludes, China would offer Seoul an alliance, undermining America's regional web, likely tipping the Philippines and Malaysia into the Chinese camp. Attempting to maintain America's worldwide alliance system might become impossible, as no reassurances would be sufficient for jittery partners. And lastly, maintaining American leadership is key. Keck 14 of the Diplomat writes, hegemonic position periods have historically been the most destabilizing eras in history. The rise of new global powers necessitates dangerous, primarily great power conflict, leading Dad 15 to conclude the next great power war would involve nuclear weapons, and it could end civilization, inviting miscalculation. Say lives negate.
Okay, let me send a doc real quick. everybody gets that.
Okay, I just got it.
All right. Is anybody not ready? We affirm contention 1 is the UN. Shinin 05 finds that Japan has warranted a permanent seat. Article 9, Japan has wanted a permanent seat. Article 9 prevents Japan from becoming a member because its ambiguous language makes it unclear whether Japan will be able to meet its responsibilities. Panton 10 furthers Japan, if it revises Article 9, will increase its diplomatic influence under UN mandates. It'll mark Japan as a new leader. This is key to pandemic responses. DPJ 05 finds in East Asia, diseases are on the rise. Japan's ODA can help curb the spread of epidemics. It is a strong leadership of Japan that is currently called for the reverse of these trends. Recna 21 concludes that pandemics can annihilate the human species. Contention 2 is checking China. Subpoint A is coalitions. If Article 9 is not reformed, right-wingers and opposing parties will break existing coalitions. Ashley 2021 finds that the question of Article 9 form a security-minded coalition between militaristic factions within the LDP and opposing parties, replacing Komeito. It may be plausible for the party to ditch Komeito in the face of a rising China by creating a reform hawkish coalition in favor of Article 9 reform. Ryall 2021 confirms that rumblings of discontent towards Komeito are growing. The alliance is being questioned by right-wing LDP members for going apart on revising the constitution. Komeito checks Sino-Japanese escalation as Harris 2021 finds a diplomatic normalization between Japan and China depend on efforts by the Komeito. The party keeps lines of communications even when diplomatic relations have been strained. Nationalist perceptions risk escalation of China. As Ross 2022, Japan's progression towards active defense will be characterized by an extended period of turbulence. Beijing will judge Tokyo's attitude as too anti-China, requiring punitive measures. Subpoint B is regionalism. Currently, CADS 17 explains that when their weak commitment for security makes it unlikely that ASEAN will be able to push an ambitious political agenda to tackle open disputes. This leaves China unchecked. As Brands writes a couple weeks ago, China is facing the end of stunning economic growth. Overuse devastating arable land. Industrialization left the country with severe water capacity. The one-child policy is now causing demographic implosion. Economic policy has been stalled because further liberalization would threaten elites. Time was on raising Beijing's side. It made sense to delay confrontation. Today, China is likely to lash out violently. She has grand ambitions. If he loses faith that patient accumulation of economic power will bring these rewards, he may take risks. Allies will have to join forces to ensure multilateral control measures. Even as China threatens their territory, Sidaris 18 finds that no single member has nearly the military strength to challenge the PRC. With Article 9 revision, ASEAN has the opportunity to leverage the one regional power capable of challenging the PRC directly, Japan. Suzuki 20 continues that Japan should take the lead in strengthening security cooperation through ASEAN. It is necessary to build a network of middle powers and carefully engage China towards shaping a multipolar Indo-Pacific. Darian 719 furthers that the edge over China's broad, durable regional alliances with Japan engaging ASEAN members to preserve and deepen order in the Indo-Pacific. The upshot is the emergence of a fluid horizontal regional order as opposed to one that is Sino-centric. Lin 21 concludes that to respond to China's increasing assertiveness across the Indo-Pacific, Japan must change its attitude towards military. If current trends are not reversed, China seems certain to project power throughout the Western Pacific and beyond. Japan must meaningfully work toward a balance of power to check Beijing's regional ambitions. The key is checking China. Chinese expansion comes at the cost of human rights, as Lifshitz 21 writes that China is not the China of even 5 years ago. A confident CCP seeks to make the world safe for authoritarianism and genocide. Freedom will drop around the world as human rights violations are excused. Since 2017, China has imprisoned more than 1 million people in detention camps. Authoritarian countries will band together to erode human rights. Even worse, Green 19 explains that the PLA would like to avoid a nuclear fight by blinding us with space and cyber, rapidly increasing nuclear escalation. Hendrickson 17 furthers that tensions stoked by assertive regimes could spark a large-scale war and trigger nuclear exchange, destroying the world. Contention 3 is political capital. Vote aft the national debate over Article 9 wastes political capital. Fiat ends that overwhelms political barriers. As Tatsumi 17 finds, the desire for constitutional revision has cost political capital and left domestic issues unattended. Reform of the tax system and entitlement programs require attention. As society continues to age, these systems will become unsuitable if not resurrected. Without reform, Japan collapses. Komeito 21, the aging of Japan will continue to shrink fiscal space because of the increased cost and debt. Low interest rates will cause the yen to depreciate. Japan will drop out the developed world. The government must implement effective fiscal measures sooner rather than later. Thus, we affirm. You ready for cross?
Yeah, I'm good. Okay, let's talk about, oh, there's a lot to talk about in this case. Let's talk about this first contention. Why is Japan uniquely key to countering a pandemic? I think we can do it without them.
Because Japan has like a lot of systems that are effective at fighting disease. For example, like during COVID-19,
WHO doesn't, and the US
what?
doesn't.
It's specifically in East Asia.
Okay, but I feel like we've had a lot of East Asian pandemics and we're all fine. We're not dead per your impact card. Like,
Right,
I don't
right.
think this is why Japan is uniquely key, considering we've had multiple pandemics and we're not all dead. And I guess you're
Because it's more about for like future responses too. Like obviously COVID wasn't like as big of a pandemic as something that could happen in the future.
like
But
what?
even if it's not pandemic specifically, the ODA system that Japan has can also help curb the spread of like regular epidemics as
Has
well.
there ever been a pathogen that has wiped out all of humanity?
Um, I think you can answer that question yourself.
Yeah, well, we're all still here. So
Right. But you
not-
can't obviously like you're never going to know about something that happens in the future, right? And even if it's like not going to wipe out all of humanity, just the risk of it is enough for Japan to be able to help. But can I take a question?
Yeah, that's fine.
Let's get to your argument about alliances. If current alliances break down, why would they turn to China? I feel like that kind of doesn't really make sense since China's their enemy, right?
Well, no, well, China's like the next largest regional player in
Wait,
in,
Okay,
in that region.
right. But like, let's say NATO breaks down, right? If NATO breaks down, that doesn't mean that all of Europe turns to Russia because NATO is like inherently an anti-Russian organization. Same with organizations like ASEAN.
You can't compare NATO and Europe and East Asia.
Right, but like I'm just making the comparative that if there's organizations that are
Well,
like
you can't.
inherently
There's different scenarios. That's like comparing apples and oranges. Like, oh, which
Wait,
one's
yeah,
worse?
but like you're
Like-
not understanding what I'm trying to say here, right? Like if there's organizations that
No,
are
because
inherently
it's not
against
intense.
Chinese aggression, why would they turn to China?
I mean, I answered your question because China is the next largest regional player.
Right, but that still doesn't. I actually, yeah, it's fine.
That's the Wadsworth card. You can look at it later. All right. Can
Okay.
I grab a question before?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about your C3. What is the impact of like Japan dropping out of the developed world? Like
Uh,
civilization.
yeah, I'm gonna be honest. There was nothing really after that. We could probably like figure something out later, but if you're asking for a specific card, there is nada.
Well, at least you're very honest.
All right. Let's go to your argument about pacifism. So you're saying that right now in East Asia, it's like incredibly peaceful. Like
Well,
it's
Article 9 is classified East Asia. That's for the uniqueness. That's
okay.
like
So what about like aggression in places like the South China Sea?
I mean, we're gonna make the argument later that China isn't revisionist.
Okay, got it.
They don't attack unless like provoked first. Do you need prep?
Yeah, we'll take a little bit.
Okay, we'll run prep starting now. Okay, that's 240 left.
The order is gonna be one off and then down their case.
Get a separate sheet of paper.
Yeah, I sent the off. It's probably gonna be like really long, but I'll just like send what I read. Let me know when everyone gets it.
Got it.
Okay. Cool. First off is paraphrasing. A is the interpretation. When evidence is introduced in a round, it must be read as a full cut card, not paraphrased. To clarify, what you read from your cards must match exactly with the highlighted text. B is a violation. They paraphrase. They are in evidence, and tons of other cards they read are paraphrased. Go on to standards. First is evidence ethics. Paraphrasing reduces nuance and in-depth evidence is a bias 2 cent summaries, which is empirically proven by the widespread use of misconstrued evidence. Cards ensure tags are grounded in direct quotes, makes it easier to check for misrepresentation, which is cheating. Evidence ethics are key to fairness. They can make infinite arguments on the topic through misrepresentation while we're restricted to topic literature. Second is more research. Paraphrasing encourages lazy lazy research practices where teams only find mediocre evidence and then misconstrue it rather than reading more topic literature to find the best evidence, which harms education because debaters learn less about the topic. Third is Prepsky. If we want to know the quote of their evidence, not only does it require us to use prep time, well, they don't have to, but it also takes longer to read through the parts they paraphrase than our quotes, which destroys fairness because it decreases our time to prepare and run strategy. Go into voters versus fairness. Abuse prevents objective valuation of substance and the round, which is your intrinsic role as a judge, and education is why schools from debate and the only long-lasting value. Drop the debate or a vote for us, endorse the positive model of debate. Wins and losses determine the direction of the activity. Teams losing for bad practice incentivize change in the future, which makes debate more educational and fairness whole. Additionally, all of their cards are paraphrased, which means drop the argument just becomes drop the debater. And this is TOC Octos. Tons of people are watching this being live stream, dropping them sets norms, default to committing interrupts because judgment intervention is bad. Then this shell is they don't get RVS for 3 reasons. One, it shells theory in 2 ways. A, we should be allowed to test legitimacy of the other team. We shouldn't lose for being wrong or no one would ever check abuse. B, it encourages good debates to be intentionally abusive. People debate theory, then win if RVS. Second, it's illogical. Their RVS also justify us winning because we're also fair. They shouldn't win just because they were fair. That's a baseline burden for everyone. And third, theory is reciprocal. They can just run theory on us too if we're abusive to notice and give them an RVI. Go to case. On UNSC, 1, there's no link. China would veto them joining the UNSC. 2 warrants. 1, they don't want to legitimize Japan as another major Asian power. And second, Japan and China are diametrically opposed on literally Asian security, every Asian issue. Prefer this default probability because China's historically blocked Japanese membership at every turn. But second, their DGP evidence is propaganda from a party platform in the Democratic Japan Party. It has no warranting whatsoever for why Japan is more equipped to solve any of these issues it references. Third, their impact evidence has 0 warrants at all. Make them actually explain in a speech how any of these things cause extinction. Don't let them do it later. And fourth, there's no warrant why Japan is key to solve these existential threats. Makes no sense at all. But on their C2, on the top shelf, deterrence is strong. 2 warrants. First is troops. EAT 21 writes East Asia have the largest concentration of U.S. forces in decades. They'll always have them in countries like Philippines, Taiwan, et cetera. They just get redeployed. But second is Biden's grand strategy. Mayor 21 furthers recent steps by Biden selling nuclear subs to Australia, outlining their approach to trade with China were big moves on the chessboard with Asia. But on China's incentive calculus, China isn't aggressive unless provoked. Shovel 22 explains that although China's have been active in its use of armed forces beyond its border in recent years, Beijing has issued large-scale combat operations. China, unlike Russia, has refrained from invasions from 1979, which you obviously prefer on empirics. But on the uniqueness, tensions are capped. First is spending. Guild 22 rates among Southeast Asian countries. Defense took a cut. Thailand and Singapore haven't ramped up military spending, but then turn affirming causes war in 2 ways. First, Richard 16 explains Chinese fear that vagueness may represent a blank check to Japanese conservative nationalists. Second, Japan could increase its patrols in the South China Sea, increasing the potential for an altercation. But on link 1, there's no link. I-621 writes, despite China's buildup, the U.S. will maintain a substantial leading key capacity such as nuclear weapons, combat aircraft, and aircraft carriers. Also on their nationalism thing, nationalism is non-unique per RC2. They're already in the government. But on link 2, on uniqueness to turn now, Harold at 19 writes, Japan's defense cooperation serves to raise the cost and dissuade China from thinking it can coerce. Second, on their impact, this is a massive double turn. Their Hendrickson evidence is from a neocon who says that we need to maintain strength in Asia, which is the exact opposite of them saying like withdrawal is good. But on C3, on the uniqueness, Japan's economy has remained strong. McCrum 18 writes, since the 90s, growth in Japan's real GDP has outperformed every major economy with 2 decades of rising living standards, income equality, and a functional banking system, which you obviously prefer because it analyzes the long term. Their evidence is what, but turn affirming kills growth. Trade wars, Sachs 21 writes, China's Japan's largest trading partner and could retaliate by curtailing bilateral trade flow and attempting to interdict critical shipments of oil and gas to Japan. On their impact, Arjun literally concedes and cross. There's no impact. Don't let them make a new one later. I'll send what I read.
Yeah, can you send like the rebuttal stuff?
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I'll send it. I have to cut out what I didn't read. Let me get the other cards. I read first. Yeah, I did. Okay. Oh, I have to. Oh, okay, I'll send this. It's gonna be 2 emails. First is all of these cards, and then I'll send the other card. Okay, there's those cards, and then I'm gonna send the econ cards because I have to cut out the those are. Okay, everything should be sent. I think I cut everything.
Sorry, I was muted. I just got it. Give me a second to call Arjun, and we'll run a little bit of prep once the call goes through.
Your call has been.
Oh. Arjun, can you just call me? I don't think close enough. Okay, we're gonna start prep now. Sorry, really quickly. Oh, 1 second. Pausing prep. What was like the on like threatening elites? It was like the stuff above Henriksen. Did you read like an analytic there, or was it
Yeah,
just?
I said Hendrickson is a massive double turn because it's from like a neocon who says the U.S. needs to remain strong and like maintain a
Okay,
presence in the region,
gotcha.
which is the opposite of what you're.
Gotcha. Gotcha. That makes sense. All right. I'm gonna resume prep with Arjun now. Okay, that's time. Anyone not ready? It's going to start with the off, then our case, and then their case.
What's the order when you're on the off?
It's just going to be like a we meet, and then it's just going to be a we meet.
Okay.
Anyone not ready? On the off, we meet, we read from full citations, and we don't paraphrase. You can look at all of our evidence. To clarify, the only thing we violate in the spirit of the interpretation is not matching the codes to the highlighting in the cards. However, that doesn't link into any one of their standards about things like evidence ethics, 2-sentence summaries, or more research, or like prep skews, because we still are reading from the direct cards and we're just highlighting more for context at bottom. None of these are linking into any of the standards. Then go to our case at the top. On the top, we're not going for the UN, we're going for China. First, we say the troops increase. Our argument is not about the US hegemony in the region, so it doesn't matter. It's about breaking over the Chinese, the Japanese coalition and causing China to become more aggressive. They say you have nuclear submarines, but that still doesn't matter if Japan becomes more aggressive. Then they say that China eschews large-scale combat operations. One, there's no warrant to Scoville, and they've conceded the warrant from Brands, which is a week ago, and postdates all their evidence talking about how China's now more desperate than ever because of huge declining economic growth. So that's at least a warrant for you to build on. Then they say the military spending hasn't increased. That's because the Comito hasn't been pushed out of offices. That's our link. They say there's a blank check conservative nationalists. They themselves saying in their C3 that nationalists are already in power, so China should have struck. And they say that you increase alterations because of the fact that like you increase patrol ships. That doesn't matter at all. Why does increasing patrol ships mean that China suddenly lashes out and fights? There's no internal link to the return. Moreover, they say that China's buildup is happening from the United States. Our argument is not about the U.S. hegemony. They're reading a bunch of responses we don't even go for. They say that Japan's defense cooperation is good because it raises the cost of war, but they've conceded that China thinks it's an existential risk, and China's likely to lash out because she has grand ambitions. There's no cost of war if they know they can destroy them quickly. They say Henriksen's a double turn because we need to maintain strong. We maintain strong by having regional coalitions. We don't need a U.S. in that area. Go to their case. On pacifism, 1, Lin 19 finds Japan's global amendment is not to initiate power struggle with Article 9 or fully amendment. Tokyo will retain a pacifist subclause because they understand that nobody wants to have a helpful militarized state. 2, there's no revision spillover. 2 warrants A, democracy. Hornex 16, if Japan revises the constitution after lengthy debate in a national referendum, it will not mean that the country is returning to militarism. It will be a sign of healthy democracy. B is parliamentary debate. List 16, even if Abe's party adopts its 2012 framework and tentative negotiations and considerations, the opposition public are likely to significantly moderate its proposals. Moreover, other more powerful countries set the norm in the area. For example, China and US are also ramping up military spending and militarization. There's no reason that's why the area is going to be passive forever. And Japan hasn't converted another country to pacifism. The entire region is heavily militarized and aggressive. It just hasn't spilled over to war. So there's no internal link as to why any of their arguments are happening, especially because this also checks all the miscalc scenarios because the militarization is happening in an area and there's no miscalc. It proves that miscalc is wrong for all their other impacts. On the CT on Pro, a couple responses. One, because atrocities in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Mochizuki 17 finds staying non-nuclear is part of Japan's national defense for the Japanese non-nuclear principles and supports risen by 82%. Two, Mochizuki furthers Japan's nuclear energy program is tied to bilateral agreements such as the NSG that embody non-proliferation principles, which has the implication that Japan will never risk breaking these agreements because they want international cooperation. Three, Mochizuki concludes Japan has significant veto powers and that crucial political actors that are likely to block efforts to develop nuclear weapons. Government agencies are committed to the peaceful use of nuclear power. That's especially true because they don't want to seem hypocritical on a non-proliferation stage. Four, international backlash also checks back. Japan doesn't want to be sanctioned to hell like Iran did and North Korea does because they want economic cooperation, especially in a time of increasing economic growth like they're talking about right now. Five, they won't do it because it risks angering opposition like North Korea, especially when they have leverage over North Korea saying we want you to stop nuclearization. So that obviously means they're not going to do it. On ending alliances, regional security cooperation is failing right now. Two warrants. A, resource scarcity outlined by the Sadars, evidenced by our case, which is conceded, prefers over theirs because it's more long-term. Geopolitical trends may change over time, but dwindling supplies and all our resources won't. So eventually the security agreements will break down. Two, Beeson 22 finds Southeast Asian nations have had great difficulty in reaching a collective position on how to respond to the intensifying great power rivalry between US and China. Our C2 texts back. Two, it creates regional cooperation in two ways. First is improving capabilities. Sadars 18. Article 9 influences current funding restraints that hamper partnering and limits the effectiveness of JSTF from contributing to regional security. B is forming alliances. Cadota 21. Collective self-defense should be used as a deterrent by countries forming an Asian version of NATO. However, Japan is denied the right to collective self-defense under Article 9, so we can improve relations all over Southeast Asia. Moreover, none of their arguments and impact on miscalc ever happened because miscalc happened 18 times in a Cold War, but they was always checked back because there's always nuclear hotline established between countries, and countries understand that they don't want to misinterpret things. So there's obviously going to be collective dialogue and regional coalition solves back for miscalc because if we can increase negotiations and influence between countries and talks, that probably means that no one misinterprets.
Send a doc.
Yeah, let me find stuff. The analytics weren't in the doc, but I will send the cards over. Okay, it's sent.
Cool. We'll let you know when we get it. Actually, we can just start cross now. I don't really care.
All right, sounds good.
Cool. Okay, what is offshore balancing?
What do you mean by that?
What is offshore balancing?
I have no clue.
So your argument is that regionalism is good, right?
Yeah.
On your second link.
Mhm.
So you're advocating for US retrenchment, right?
No.
Like Japan should take up a greater role, right?
In establishing regional coalitions in that front, yeah.
Okay, but I look at your Hendrickson evidence, and Hendrickson is pretty clearly a neocon who says like that the US should not retrench, and the US doing retrenchment causes like nuclear war.
That doesn't matter. The US doesn't have to retrench. The argument we're going for is that the US doesn't matter to win any of our arguments. Like the first thing on coalitions is nothing to do with like regionalism at all. But specific to regionalism in the area, even if the US doesn't retrench, the fact is that Southeast Asian countries that aren't like necessarily following the US rigorously and want Japan to take a role, want Japan to establish those coalitions. So the US can still be in a region and Japan can also establish coalitions at the same time. So Hendrickson will be true.
No, but your Hendrickson evidence specifically says that even if the US is still there in a minor form, overall, we still need the US to be dominant and there and have a greater role than regionalism.
No, the Henriksen evidence gives the warrant as to why the US should be there, and it's that we need to stay strong to deter hawkish behavior. That staying strong warrant from Henriksen that Henriksen gives comes from regional alliances too. That's the entire basis of our case. So even if Henriksen is advocating for the US to stay in there, the fact that the warrant to Henriksen is still triggered means we still have impact. Can I have a question? Okay, so let's talk about your C2 really quickly in prolif, right? So
Yeah.
You say that Article 9 restricts Japanese prolif and they have the capability to get it overnight, like suddenly, right? So like walk me through this process. If Article 9 is amended and then Japan suddenly has the ability to do that, how do they just like start an entire nuclear facility process and have nuclear weapons like the next day? Like how does that happen?
They already have all the infrastructure, all the testing facilities, all the nuclear energy, etc. And the people in power want to get the nuclear weapons per like even your first link.
Which people in power want nuclear weapons there?
The conservative nationalists who like.
Okay, so our conservative conservative nationalists want nuclear power. That's like nuclear energy.
No. They want nuclear weapons.
Yeah, they want nuclear weapons. That's correct.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, the conservative nationalists are going to have like a 2/3 majority and then argue for.
We're going to make an argument that.
And then after that debate happens. No. So I understand, but to get nuclear weapons and begin actually like developing them, I understand the development process can take a day. But how long is like the entire negotiation process to like convince Parliament that we want nuclear weapons? Actually convince the public that
is when you do the resolution to develop offensive military capabilities in the resolution.
No, yeah, you do the resolution to have offensive capabilities, the ability to do so. It doesn't mean that you all of a sudden have nuclear weapons. You start developing that. That is a separate process.
To develop means like in order to develop them.
Right. So you have the ability to develop, but you're not actually developing.
That's process. We'll frontline this. We'll take prep. How much have you used?
We use like 20 seconds.
Okay.
We have 240. Pause prep. What was your second response on prolif?
The second response on prolif was Mochizuki. Japan's nuclear energy program is tied to bilateral agreements such as the NSG that embody non-proliferation principles, so they won't risk breaking it.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. We're gonna resume prep. Okay, this is 28 seconds left. Order's gonna be shall, our case, their case. Is anybody not ready? Okay, great. It's TOC octas, and there is only one response on a shell, and it's a we meet. They don't have a counter interp or any offense on the theory layer. They concede you default to competing interps to avoid judge intervention, so you do just that. They say that they don't violate the shell. Yes, they do. We clarified it for them. What you read from your cards must match with the highlights. Check the email chain. Look at the day GP card. They highlighted stuff about climate change. They don't read that at all. And their brand evidence and tons about their evidence that they've used to paraphrase. We don't have time to go through all of it because we have 3 minutes of prep. And also in rebuttal, they paraphrase Mochizuki hella. With that, you can extend the shell. A is the interpretation. What evidence is introduced in random, it must be read as full card and not paraphrase. Clarify what you read from your cards much fast. Exactly what they highlighted text. Violations that they paraphrase. And go into standards. We're going to set evidence misrepresentations that gets some access to infinite arguments while we're restricted topic language, massively use ground and fairness, and also prep skew because we have to waste all our prep time to get back your paraphrase, which destroys fairness because it increases our time to prep inbound strategy and kills all substantive clash in education. Move on to the voters. Fairness. Judges are asked to vote for the better debaters. Nobody would participate if it wasn't fair in education because the only portable skill one debate fund in the first place. You drop them to set better norms in the future by disincentivizing the practice because it's TOC octas is live stream. Come on. At that point, theory outweighs substance for 3 reasons. 1, fiat is loose reaffirming indicating it does absolutely nothing wrong. We could set norms like education through theory. 2, theory is the only way to check back if views on the substantive layer. And 3, it's a link back and fire. We increase education and fairness in all future rounds just outweighs on scope. Except no RBI warrants in case they try to do some things poorly. It shows theory. We should be able to test your legitimacy. If we lose for being wrong, nobody would ever risk checking back views. They say that highlights don't link to their standards. Yes, they do. The warrant on prep skew is that they can hide misconstruction of horses to read through dozens of lines on evidence misconstruction. They can add a ton of lines that they didn't read. Instead of adding context, what context? It sounds like cheating to add extra stuff in your speech that you're not reading without taking up time to actually read it, but also underlining solves will still maintain the context. And this is like basically just flipping at this point. So whatever, go to our case. On C1, we can see the difference. We're not going for it. We're going to go for C2. From there, you can extend it. Japan's far-right leaders want to develop nuclear weapons uniquely after Ukrainian invasion, but Article 9 bans nuclear weapons. However, revising Article 9 mandates that they develop 1,000 weapons overnight using plutonium stock and modern technology was needed to preempt destruction of North Korea and China, causing miscall from short warning times and causing exchange from a nuclear famine. This means this outweighs on time for as soon as you vote after they drop the Japan starts to militarize and develop nukes, which causes preemptive strikes from other countries, which is far faster than any of their impacts triggered, but also on Lincoln because massive regional war triggers all their arguments on a far larger scale, but also on magnitude because it causes extinction, but outweighs everything else scope and magnitude also prerequisites because we can't solve anything if we're all dead. Prefer magnitude over all the way because it's just numbers which avoids judgment advantage, but also way on probability because relative to the most likely scenario for nuclear war, map prevents war between the US and China with things like miscalculation from new nuclear states uniquely cause war, and also the flight times are too short. On a top level response to all the stuff they read, group in Japan cares about security over these things, and irrational far-right politicians push for regardless of the perception triggers immediately. Then first they say it's unpopular, but no, because the invasion of Ukraine makes these things, made nukes popular, but also you can, then they say treaties, but fiat circumvents, and it also doesn't matter what the people want, it's what the military does. Then they say vetoes, you can't veto the military, and there's no warrant why they veto. Fourth, they say international backlash, which is empirically not proven in the past. There's no backlash with nukes. And also, fifth, they say it anchors North Korea. They care about security more, but also fiat solves all this. On our C3, we can see difference that regional security cooperation is failing right now, and it'll also fail, so none of it matters. On their case, you can extend the no link that despite China's buildup, the U.S. will maintain substantial leading key capacities such as nuclear weapons, combat aircraft, and aircraft carriers. And I'm out of time.
Okay, Arjun and I are gonna call. I'll give y'all a thumbs up when the call goes through. Okay, Arjun, can you just call me? My phone is. Okay, starting prep now. Great, that's our prep.
Okay, order is just going to be on the shell. their case, and then our case. Anybody not ready? Okay. Briefly on the shell, we meet the interpretation. We read from direct quotes. The only part of the shell that's actually independent from what like their standards are saying is that we need to read. We need to like highlight the parts there, and they say that like it wastes their prep time. But a couple of responses: one, it doesn't waste your prep time because you're going to need to look for context regardless what happens. Two, it's probably better that we highlight the context rather than what you do, where you literally shrink it, which makes it even more difficult for us to read it too. But the fact of the matter is that we don't link into the shell because of the fact that like we're reading direct quotes. All of it matches exactly with how the shell was written in terms of that aspect. So we're not going to violate it. It doesn't matter about competing in terms throughout the rest of the paradigm issues because all of those are going to be moot since we're meeting the shell. But let's go on to their case. Also, the Michizuki evidence was not paraphrased. It was also direct quotes. You can check it yourself too. It finds that it doesn't matter what happens in the military because there's significant veto power by other players in Japan, meaning that they're always going to be able to veto the actions that's going to take place, meaning that the military doesn't matter. But let's go to our case. They read one response saying that like the United States is going to lead, but they've consistently conceded that our argument is not about the United States. Let's extend it. It's very simple. Without revising Article 9, right-wing parties will break existing political coalitions with the Komeito in favor of more hawkish coalitions in face of a rising China. This is devastating as diplomatic normalization between Japan and China depends on efforts by the Komeito since they keep lines of communication even when relations are strained. This results in an extended period of turbulence where Beijing judges Tokyo's attitude as too anti-China, requiring punitive measures. The impact is that China seeks to make the world safe for authoritarianism, genocide, decreasing freedoms around the world, and increasing human rights violations. Furthermore, PLA space escalation and tensions stoked by assertive regimes sparks large-scale wars, triggering a nuclear exchange that destroys the world. The weighing is very simple. Genocide and human rights violations come first because wars and economic crises are global phenomena and give immediate attention, but abuses occur under the cover of the state and go unprioritized. Structural violence is invisible, embedded in social structures and stable institutions. They seem ordinary, but produce suffering and death, though the damage is slow and difficult to repair. Ignoring these trends is the root cause of larger suffering. This prereqs their case because, one, it means that if right-wingers break coalitions, then they also advocate for things like Article 9. The only difference is that the Komeito or the Komeito is the party in Japan that's actually going to be keeping the peace, and so the only ones that have direct lines of communication between Japan and China, meaning that even if there's a conflict scenario in both worlds, the affirmative world is the only case in which like these lines of communication still exist. Also, the Komeito are going to be the organization that has the veto power on stuff like militarization in Japan too, which means that it's going to be checking back for all their impacts. I have 30 seconds left, so I'm just going to go back to the shell. Let me see if there's anything that I missed. Wait, Justin, is there anything that I missed?
Very good.
Okay, well, I guess that's it.
Do you want to do grand or?
What do you think?
It's TSC optics. We're gonna do grand.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll think of a question. Cool. How long does it take to lead to the like regional security alliances you're talking about?
We're not talking about regional security alliances.
I think you went for.
Oh, coalitions?
We went for coalitions. Coalitions isn't between countries, it's about political coalitions within Japan. So we're basically saying that the Komeito as well as the LDP are two conservative parties in Japan, but the Komeito traditionally sticks with peace since they're the organization that keeps peace between China and Japan by maintaining these lines of communications. By not revising Article 9, the LDP is going to become much more aggressive and hawkish. So they're going to destroy these coalitions with the Komeito, meaning that they're going to be militarizing even more, which triggers their conflict scenario.
So how long does that take to happen? Is my question.
It's already happening right now.
I know, but when will alliances collapse is my question. When will your
Well, I mean, like alliances have already collapsed. Like that's all the defense I read on your C3.
So is your scenario non-unique then?
No.
Why? Like when is this going to happen?
Like, we're not like okay, so subpoint A is not about alliances collapsing about it. The subpoint A is about Komeito being able to establish diplomatic ties with China. Alliances is like separate about them collapsing. The Komeito establishing ties with China is from the Rael evidence that finds that there's already rumblings in the entire political sphere in Japan about wanting to take out Komeito.
Okay.
Y'all have a question?
Sure. No, I don't really have anything. If y'all want another one.
Oh, give it a question.
Not really, but I'll try to think of one.
Oh, for clarification, when you went back, no, wait. Okay, you extended the we meet on the shell, and then what was the next response?
Oh, after the we meet, it was just that the only part of the shell that like is independent is that you're talking about us needing to highlight the parts that we read. And I just said a couple of things. First, I said that the standards from your shell don't talk anything about highlighting. And then the implication that you made in your summary about it being more difficult for you to like read the context, that's probably not true, because if we highlight it, that makes it more obvious what the context is versus what y'all are doing where you shrink around it, which makes it more difficult to read.
Context and you're not reading it.
What?
So you're highlighting stuff for context, but you're just
Okay,
not
well, like, let's be honest here. Like, there's no rule that says that what you highlight in a card needs to be exactly what you read, right? Like, obviously, that's like a norm that like some people might have, but
that's our inter.
yeah, but right. It could be your inter, but the standards in your shell don't talk about why the highlighting part specifically.
Really quick question, Arjun. You
Yeah.
extended on the shell. You extended the we meet. It doesn't waste prep time, and you highlight the context. Is that it, or is there something else?
Wait, what?
Yeah, that was it.
That's
Yeah.
it. Okay. Cool.
Okay. There's like
How much prep time do we have?
28 seconds.
We have 28 seconds.
Okay. We'll take that. Starting prep now.
Okay, it'll just be the shell. Yeah. Okay. Everyone good? Cool. Actually starting on the way, like the theory over substance wing. The round is done. They've conceded all the reasons why theory outweighs substance. Any risk on our shell wins the round. Extend that A. Fiat is illustrating, affirming, or negating does literally nothing in the real world, but we can set norms like education through theory. This means that their case inherently does not matter at all because they don't actually do anything. They don't actually make any pre-fiat impacts, which means at worst you presume for us because we lost the coin flip, which means that there's inherent advantage in favor of them because they have more predictability, which means that already you vote for us there. Also, they've conceded that theory is the only way to check back abuse on the substantive layer, which means that we uplayer all of your substance. They've inherently skewed us out of the round with their unfair highlighting, which means that if we win that, they violate our shell, we outweigh their stuff. And third, it's a link magnifier because we increase education and fairness in all future rounds. They extend a few things. One is that we meet. They keep misunderstanding the shell. No, they don't. We sent the text of the interp in the email chain. They say they don't link and it matches. Again, we clarify the impact for the interp for them, which is that they need to have the exact same highlights as in their cards. This has been in the shell since the first time we read it, and they've never responded to it. They say it doesn't waste prep time. One, it's new in second summary. Do not evaluate it. Also, they've conceded that massive highlights means we are literally unable to interact and read all of your arguments. Then they say they highlight the context. They extend this through ink. One, what context? It's cheating to read extra stuff in your speech that you're not actually reading without taking extra time to read it. Two, underlining solves while still maintaining context. And like this is basically just flipping. And it was new in the stuff about us shrinking. It's new in second summary, and it's about a norm for debate. They've conceded it competing interpretations because it avoids judge intervention. Any risk on our wing and our shell wins the round. All the responses are inherently defense. There is no way for them to win the round. They say highlighting context, that's better than shrinking context. This concede they paraphrase because they didn't read all the highlighted text, and that's our interp. They say our standards don't talk about highlighting. That's our definition of paraphrasing, not reading. Extend the interp when evidence is introduced in a round must be read as full cut card, not paraphrase to clarify. You have to read the same as the highlighted text violation. They didn't. Extend standard, which is that evidence misrepresentation gives access to infinite arguments on the top wall. Words to topic literature massively skewing ground and fairness, and vote on fairness because judges are asked to vote for who the better debaters are, and no one would participate. If it wasn't fair and you drop them, set better norms in the future by disincentivizing the practice. The wang is so clean, shell is clean. They do link to the shell, and all the responses are defense. Substance debate doesn't matter. Presume for us at the worst. Vote on the shell at the best. There's no way to vote for them.
Okay, it's going to be the shell, and it'll be our case, and it'll start with like the weighing stuff. Anyone not ready? If they don't want a shell, you don't presume for them. You go for substantive theories and no voting issue. So let's talk about the shell. First of all, we meet. They say that the only thing we misunderstand is that they clarify the interp. Their interps are two different things. Their first interp is no paraphrasing, no direct, only direct quotes. We meet that. And then they put some clarification saying, then you also cannot add extra context in the card. These are two different things. The problem with that is all their standards apply to their first interp on no paraphrasing, which we meet. That's why all of their implications on prep skew for the second interp about highlighting is new in seconds and new in first summary. That's why we were making new arguments. If you look at their document, every single one of their warrants for prep skew are talking about how direct quotes and not reading them creates a prep skew, not about adding extra context in the highlighting. We literally sent our direct quotes and what we read, which is why we are meeting their standard. That is the implication Arjun makes. It's not new, and even if it is new, it's new because they made new implications to their second argument in first summary. So let's talk about what they've conceded. First of all, they've conceded that adding extra context to the cards at the bottom are better than them shrinking all their evidence because we can't check back on anything and can't understand the full context of the card. That turn is conceded. We don't need a counter interpretation like they're talking about if we're literally meeting their interpretation in the first place. There is literally no standard. And also, there's no standard to extend towards a highlighting argument, and you literally cannot vote on it in the first place. Moreover, they say it's reading extra stuff is cheating, and underlining is also the same thing. Okay, what is the difference in like between underlining and highlighting? There's no like distinction here, and that's new in first final focus. With that being said, let's talk about our case because it's very simple and conceded. We're going for coalitions. The actually evidence finds is that Article 9 forms security-minded coalitions between militaristic factions and Commuto. But now there's rumblings to replace Commuto in the status quo, which can only be quelled when you affirm the resolution and allow for Commuto to stay in power. That's critical because you check things like diplomatic relations with China and ensure communication lines to solve miscalculation and nuclear war. The only way to vote on substantive round, and it's pretty easy considering we literally do not violate.
Good round.
Good round, everyone.
Okay, is everyone here? Cool. Congratulations to making it to octafinals of the TOC. That is a huge accomplishment. You all should feel incredibly proud of yourselves. I thought this was a great round. So yeah, just like taking a moment to appreciate all of you and all of the really hard work you've done. It's a 3-0 for the neg. I'm happy to go first. I thought this round was pretty clear. Like when the I meet was read, I was just kind of shocked because like I looked at the first card that's paraphrased in the case in comparison to the card that was cut, and it was different. Like the syntax was moved around because was added, like there were additional highlighting. So I think like you needed to read a counter interpretation. I think you definitely do violate, even independent of these arguments about like whether you're allowed to highlight additional stuff. Besides that, I think that like they're very clear when they're reading the initial shell that you have to read precisely what is in the highlighted card. And so I don't think it's fair to like stand up in summary and be like, these are new implications of the argument, because like the argument was implicated as saying exactly that in the first speech. So I think those arguments are new and I don't feel comfortable evaluating them. But I also do think that the initial shell is justifying why it's not okay to highlight something that you didn't read in the additional speech, because it's like equivalent to cutting or to clipping, because you're claiming offense from something that you didn't actually read in the round, which is like a pretty clear and intuitive argument. They're also winning competing interpretation. So like, even if it's probably fine for you to do this, which I also don't think it is, like you don't have a counter interpretation. You would have had to read a counter interpretation that would be like, we may read direct quotes and have we may read direct quotes from a card and have additional highlighting in the cards that we provide in the document. That would have had to be a counter interpretation that's read in the initial speech, which I also don't think you meet, because I do think you're paraphrasing. But like if you were to go for the strategy, that has to happen in rebuttal. And then you have to have articulations as to why their arguments don't apply and why it's actually a good thing. But I think you end up losing that debate and it happens too late. Even if I were to give credence to those arguments, like I think the response that's like you can underline something without highlighting it is like totally sufficient. You're like, that's the same thing. That's definitely not the same thing. Like you're making it big, it's legible to read, but you're indicating that you didn't read it in the round, so everyone knows you didn't have it at offense. That's definitely better. So under competing interpretations, like that's totally sufficient offense for them. So I think that this theory debate is pretty clear. I don't know who's like seniors or not, but in the future, I would definitely recommend like just read cut cards, or like if you're gonna paraphrase, like just you did paraphrase, so you have to read a counter interp.
Okay, I guess I can go next. I pretty much agree with everything that was just said. I sort of viewed what the app did as card clipping by highlighting the text and saying like we read full quotes, but all the stuff on theory I agree with. I think something that the neg could add to the shell is that would be unique to like the highlighting, but also reading direct quotes sort of stuff that the app was saying, is saying that there's a difference between what's read in the debate and what a judge reads after the debate, because a judge would assume that what was highlighted is what was read in the debate. So a judge would read through the highlighting and be like, oh, this is an argument that was made in the round, where it might not necessarily have been. So I think that could have been a specific argument that you can add to the shell that would make it even better. But yeah, I thought the interp from the get-go is pretty clear. So I agree that I don't think they meet.
I can go next. I think I'm somewhat more sympathetic to the AF in this debate, but I saw it pretty similarly. I think my issue is, Neg, I just don't understand why y'all are reading the same shell that other people read with a slightly different interp. It just creates like slight imprecisions that make this debate a little bit more frustrating than it has to be, in the sense that we have to have this debate about whether or not what paraphrasing is, etc., which just isn't particularly pleasant. If your interp is they shouldn't read stuff that they highlight, like they shouldn't not read stuff that they highlighted, that would be a more comprehensible interp that would make this a better debate instead of describing things with a term of art that is widely understood in the community as to mean something else. I think the first judge might have been correct that you did paraphrase. I honestly didn't go back and check because it didn't have to. I thought that the other stuff was winning for you already. But like, for example, you all keep extending this evidence ethics argument, but it's not clear to me why this over highlighting causes worse evidence ethics. Now, I intuitively know that clipping is bad for evidence ethics because for a variety of reasons, in fact, but none of that is really developed. And the only like standard that I think that you extend that can reasonably be linked into over highlighting in this argument about prep skew, which I just don't think is answered. And so I think it is a pretty easy negative ballot in that sense. But please fix this shell if you want to read it. At least in my view, I'm not like a theory debating expert, but I really just don't think this round, I think this round was made a lot more late breaking by the fact that the shell is a little bit imprecise. I'll say that the rest of the debate, I think, boils down pretty simply. I think the only argument the affirmative has is this context turn. I have no idea why context matters. They've also conceded that underlining solves it, which wasn't new in the first final focus. It was in the first summary as well. And it's also unclear why this takes out the link that when you over highlight things, even if there's like context or whatever, it still creates prep skew against them. And there's no standard given off context. So I like from a technical perspective, I don't really see a way that to vote AF, but I am sympathetic to the AF in the sense that I think that this shell could have been worded in a way that was more amenable to an in-depth debate. But nonetheless, congratulations to both teams on reaching TOC octas. It's a really impressive accomplishment. So I don't want any of that to detract.
Yeah, congratulations, everyone. Good luck.
Any
Yeah.
questions?
All right, thank you for judging and good luck to college prep.
Bye.
Good luck. Bye.